Hello, Jamie. I'm very excited to hang out with you today and learn a little bit about how you became the man you are today. Now,
Cool.
Dave Gonzalez of Lost Worlds Brewing, who you were his employer at some point in time, he's the one who connected us. And he
Right.
cannot stop saying that you're one of the nicest guys in the world. Why do people think you're just the nicest person?
I don't know. In fact, just recently I was called an old shoe, and I had to think about what that meant, and maybe that gives some insight. I think people are just comfortable around me. I guess I listen sometimes. I don't know. So
They're all great qualities, and it's great to talk to
yeah,
someone who just has a smile on their face. It's nice to see that smile in the current state of things. So, one, appreciate you hanging out with me today. Now,
definitely.
I'm in Virginia, so I've been lucky enough to enjoy Foothills for quite some time, and I see you cracking something right
I'm
now.
gonna
What
have
are
to
you
crack a
opening
beer
for
this
us?
time, right?
Yeah, it's time. What are you drinking today?
Hoppy IPA. It's our can you see it?
Yeah.
That's our flagship beer. It's about half our sales, so it's important beer. One of my favorites. So um,
When you first brewed that beer, did you think it would be the one that just kind of consumed so much of your lineup?
um, in the beginning, we sold more light beer than anything. We started kind of early on, and Winston-Salem didn't have a huge craft beer community. So, no. I mean, yeah, I think I was hoping that eventually people would drink more IPA than light beer. And obviously, at least in the craft beer world, that's definitely true now. Yeah.
And
So,
that's not a hazy either.
nope. It's almost like a East Coast style. It's a little more amber and got a little bit of sweetness to it. But it's a good one. So,
No, it's absolutely a delicious one.
yeah.
Now, one of my first memories of Foothills, I was driving through North Carolina at some point. I was going on a vacation to Boone, North Carolina, and you were at a good midpoint to stop for the night. I wanted to try the brew pub myself, and I took this picture and I was able to find it in my archives. And let's see if you can recognize what we're looking at right now. Do you know what is on my old
That's
camera phone
is that a
plate?
mushroom burger?
No, well, you're close. I think there might be mushrooms on top, but do you know what kind of meat is on that burger?
What kind of cheese? Is
Probably
that
about 7, 8
some kind of
years.
Gruyere or Brie or something?
So it was an ostrich burger, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, yeah, yeah. We used to have all our grain went to an ostrich farmer, and we would. Well, he wouldn't give us meat. He would allow us to buy meat from him. But we had it for a long time, and then he started supplying Southern Foods, a bigger vendor, and that became his priority after a while. So
It
and he,
was
he
so
was our
interesting.
farmer, grain farmer for a decade or so. Um, and great guy. I still love him, but we dropped him eventually because we got a call from a different grain farmer saying, I didn't get grain this week. And we're like, who are you? And he's like, well, Paul's been selling me grain this week. And or Paul's been selling me grain. And we were just giving it away. So I was like, well, maybe that's not, maybe we're done with that relationship. But
Oh man,
uh,
that's interesting. So I guess
yeah.
no more ostrich burger on the menu.
Yeah, he had about 100 ostrich just outside of Winston, about 20 minutes here. So he had a pretty good herd. It was a little scary to see all those birds in one place, to be honest.
Yeah, I imagine they're a little intimidating. Once
He,
I
would-
went
he
to
would
brew.
come in with bruises sometimes where they beat him up a little bit. Yeah, I mean they're big birds. They're like
Yeah,
dinosaurs.
I wouldn't mess with an ostrich for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was one of my memories of stopping through a long time ago. Hope to make it back before too long because you're not too far away. But it was just so interesting to see an ostrich burger on the menu that it stuck with me.
Yeah, it was unique, that's for sure. We had that probably for 7 years or a pretty good while we had it on the menu. But yeah. So well, thanks for having me.
No, definitely. So let's dive into you. I mean, obviously you've ran Foothills Brewing for quite some time now. You built a reputation of being the nicest guy in the world, making delicious beer. But where did you grow up, Jamie?
Born in Queens, grew up in Delaware and Pennsylvania, just kind of around the border of Wilmington. My dad worked for DuPont, and they were based up there. So went to school up there. Moved to Georgia when I was 17. When I went to college, I went kind of a little bit young, just turned 18 while I was there. So University of Georgia for an anthropology degree is what I went for. And after that, I started brewing beer pretty soon after that, my sophomore year of college. started homebrewing, and within a few months, the guy who I was buying homebrew supplies from became the brewer at the first brewery in Athens.
What brewery was that?
Long before Terrapin and Creature Comforts, and it was Blind Man Ales. The guy who I guess has got an inheritance from his grandmother of $40,000, and that's all he ever put into it. So it was a tough. We could spend a whole hour just talking about that brewery and the flaws and interesting things that we did there. But it was cool. So I mean, I've been working in a brewery since I was 19, and I've been doing it my whole life, basically, my whole adult life, basically.
I love it. So before you got into the craft beer world at age 19, if you were just a kid, everybody had that dream of what they want to be when they grow up. So if we were to, interact when you were just say 10 years old, what did you want to be back then?
Strange enough, well, at least when I was a freshman in high school, took a business class, and me and my buddy who sat in the back, we talked about how it would be cool to start a brewery. So even as young as, 13, 14 years old, I don't know why. It was just in my head that we were going to make beer one day. So, but before that, I don't even recall what I wanted to be. If I was
You don't meet a lot of brewery owners who had the dream since they were just a young teenager. I mean, was your dad a beer person back then, or did you have someone in your life?
He hardly drinks. So I don't know what it was. We were just came up with the idea while we're sitting in the back of the classroom being deviants, and I didn't really think a whole lot of it after that for several years. Obviously, I got into school for like economics or something like that, and quickly switched away from that to psychology, which I even more quickly switched away to anthropology. And I took an anthropology class. I'm like, this is it. I feel comfortable here. And, there's a large number of people in anthropology who brew beer. So it was
interesting. So what about anthropology interested you?
I think it's just, study of culture. And it's just you learn about people and from different angles. And I think I've always been pretty good at reading people, just kind of learning about culture and how people interact, and from prehistoric time, from all different kinds of times. Our focus was, being at University of Georgia, it was focused on Southeastern Indians mainly, and their culture and the mound culture. So it was just fascinating. We were living in the area that we were studying. We did a lot of field work to tie in with the classes, and it was just such a easy connection for me. I don't know what it was, to be honest, but
the study of people is absolutely fascinating. So
yeah,
you got connected to beer really quickly. But if you had pursued that degree, what did you think you were going to do with it even further following college?
I did some field work after school. I did some like data analysis at the University of Georgia Anthropology Lab, and then I worked part-time at a lot of jobs, a brewery and delivering pizzas and some photography. And also there was a private anthropology firm in Athens, and started working for them. And I worked there for about 2 or 3 years after I got out of school. And I was able to, doing that and still working at a brewery, I was able to save a bunch of money because all I did was work, and so that helped me start Foothills, basically. Spent several years basically working 29, 30 days a month. Several jobs, and but I was, focused, I guess, back then, as I am now. But it was an interesting time back then. I was homebrewing a bunch. We had a kind of open door culture at my apartment, and all my friends would come in all the time, and we'd be drinking different homebrews and trying different stuff. In fact, I still have a couple bottles of my first brew.
Oh my gosh!
I doubt it's very good because it's from '93. It's just like it was a Sam Adams ale, Boston ale clone. That's back when they still had Boston ale. It was a long time ago. Back then, the only craft beers we could get were Sam, Pete's Wicked, and a little bit of Sierra Nevada. So we used to throw cake parties and We get like a keg of Sierra Nevada Stout and a keg of PBR. Like if you like craft beer, drink this. If not, just go with the PBR because you're not gonna like that.
So you were educating people even back then.
You had to. I mean,
I know for me, the first homebrew that I brewed was a clone of Brooklyn Summer Ale. You know, it's nice to find something that you know that you want to recreate that's light and drinkable, and you just want to share with your friends.
Yeah, I bought Charlie Papazian's book, but got a ride to Atlanta because this is before cell phones or a lot of internet, right? So there was a homebrew shop in Atlanta. So that my first year of school, we drove down there and just to buy that book, and I read it over the summer, and got into an apartment in the second year of school, and I was ready to go, man. So
I think we all read that book.
We converted a closet into put these 2x12s, like big heavy duty shelves, and we had like 15 carboys. We were brewing 3 times a week, all the time.
So at what point in time did you decide you wanted to stop working your let's say your real job at that time to follow your passion and to go into brewing?
I mean, it's hard to discern because within months I was working at a brewery. So I was already in the industry. I was, spent 3 of my 4 years in college working at a brewery as well as some other jobs because it didn't pay that great. But so they just kind of weave together. I mean, there was so many people in anthropology who brewed beer, several professors who brewed beer. I taught one of my professors how to brew beer. It's hard to really separate them in my mind or my life because they really just came on at the same time, and I just kind of dove into
is that because beer is such a big part of culture, even from early day cultures?
Yes, yeah. I mean that was definitely part of it. Is the classic story about how civilization started. Well, if you want to make beer, you want to make alcohol, you got to stay somewhere and grow some kind of starch, right, or sugar. So you can't be nomadic if you want to have a yield of a crop. So people had to sit down in one place and turn from being nomadic hunter gatherers to a more sedentary lifestyle that included grain and yeast and alcohol and beer.
Are there any early civilizations that you were really impressed by with regard to their production of beer?
In South America, there's the Chica, and obviously in Egypt they drank beer. I mean, I never really delved into a lot of the specifics of that, but I let Sam from Dogfish Head do that.
He does a good job of that.
Yeah. And in fact, well, not to talk about anything crazy, but we made back at the first brewery I worked at, we made an India brown ale, like 5 or 6 years before the style was invented, even. So.
And how was it?
It was good. The brewery was crazy. A quick story. I'll try to be quick about that. So we have Pepto-Bismol fermenters. They were single wall on wheels that we rolled out of an air conditioned room. That was we didn't have glycol control in any of the tanks. It was just in an AC room. We'd roll the fermenter over to the brew house area. The brew house was square. The kettle was square. The mash tun was square. They were old tofu cookers or something like that. That, again, 40 grand doesn't buy a lot of equipment. And back then, there really was no equipment for small breweries. I mean, when Blind Man opened, there might have been 10 breweries in Georgia. And South Carolina was probably 0, and North Carolina there was probably 5 or 8. So we're talking. Now the last count I heard 372 in North Carolina. We were the 19th, and we didn't even open that early. So, but the equipment at Blind Man was very subpar. We had one pump. I don't know how familiar you are with the brewing process, but we didn't have any tri-clamps. All our connections were threaded fittings, and it was very rudimentary. It was like home brewing on 17 barrel scale. So it took us about 18 hours to make a batch of beer. and another 8 hours the following day to clean up.
Oh my God.
Horrible deal. So no temperature control, no pressure control in the tanks. So all of our beer was naturally carbonated. We would prime with some beer. We'd pull off a little beer from a batch and just, prime with just natural sugar. And so we definitely had some inconsistency problems, to say the least. About a third of the beer was great. A third of it was probably undercarbed, and the third was overcarbed. We were bottling out of homebrew buckets, and it was literally a home brewery on a large scale. It was a trip.
I imagine it was quite the learning experience. But looking back on that experience, a blind man, is there something that you learned that still helps you to this day? Or is it more so
Definitely. It taught me what you can do with little, and that, it's very hard for me to hear the word no, we can't do that. In other words, we can't do that, because being from a place where you had to overcome so much adversity, it was just, now we have much better equipment. And so when I hear we can't do that, it taught me to get it done at all costs. And
No, that makes sense.
I think that's generally good, not always, but we definitely learned to get a lot done with little. And so we were selling beer across Georgia, in North Carolina, like up at Barleys Taproom in Asheville, back in 94, 95, when that place was just opening and becoming, you're familiar with Barleys? Andrew, you appear to be frozen. I'll just keep talking. I mean, that was a place that Skyland Distributing had a distributor in Georgia, and then one in North Carolina. You there, Andrew? You there? I see you.
Are you there? I apologize for that. This is the week
okay.
The internet does not like me, and my power just went in and out. I apologize.
Okay, no, I saw you frozen. Yeah, we were selling beer up at Barleys Taproom in North Carolina. Do you familiar with that place? In Asheville.
I am.
Anyway, yeah, it was one of the first, basically the first craft beer bar that I was aware of. There really wasn't anything like that in Georgia, and so we were filling kegs, going, heading up there in 94, 95. And now I have friends from North Carolina who used to go there and drink that beer at the time. They're like, oh yeah, I knew that beer, even though they didn't know me. So we started doing several beer festivals in North Carolina, and we used to take the first 10 gallons of every batch, and like the first runoff, the high strength stuff, and we'd boil it down and make really high alcohol beer, 12, 13% beer. And we would always bring that to these beer festivals. And it was really fun because most people never had beer that strength. This was long before Pop the Cap. And, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, the alcohol laws were 5 or 6% alcohol. So we were making some fun beers, even way back then. There was a homebrew club in Athens called Brew 52s. And that was, definitely learned a lot at that club. Spent a lot of time trying different beers and, getting a lot of feedback at the time. So you there, Andrew? Still freezing up. Can you hear me? No. Well, after that, I liked North Carolina, so I decided to move there. I don't know if anyone else listening now. Andrew, you there? He's not there.
Jamie, I don't know what's going on in my world of internet today. It
That's all
obviously
right.
does
I'm
not
pretty
like me.
sure
So I greatly
I'm
for that.
stable here. Here at work. So
Yeah, no, it's all on me. My lights just flickered in my home for whatever reason. It's not stormy, and I wish I could blame the crazy Virginia weather, but I don't have that good excuse today.
you're in Norfolk.
Yeah, I'm in Norfolk, Virginia, so not terribly far from you.
Yeah, cool.
But I do have a question for you. So I want to back up for just a second. So working in the breweries in these early days, I mean, you started when you were 19, you said, were you primarily working in the back of house in production?
Yes, yes. I mean, the first brewery I worked at, there was, you got to go way back in time because it was a production brewery. Blind Man Ales was a production, but there was no tasting room. There were no tasting rooms allowed back then. So
Yeah,
it was
especially in Georgia.
Yeah, particularly in Georgia, right? So it was 3,000 square foot, just production. So we would do the only customer facing stuff we had is if we did an event at a bar in Athens or in Atlanta or in Asheville where we sold. So it was all production, brewing and packaging, so. Then the second brewery I worked at was Vista Brewing in Columbia, South Carolina, just 2 blocks from the Capitol on Park and Gervais. This guy had a French fine dining restaurant, French chef, French sous chef. Like even back in I started working there in '96. Like $35 entrees. It was expensive for back then. He had gambling there, a raw bar on the bar, like oysters, on the half shell, and a tiny little brewery, 7-barrel. And it was actually somewhat real equipment. But he didn't want a full-time brewer. He had one, old friend of mine, actually from Athens. He had to bartend, manage. So I was doing several other things, working at Blind Man and doing archaeology. So I said, how about this? I'll just come there, make beer, and I'll leave. And you pay me by the day. So it worked out good for me because I could go down and work for 3 days and, make some pretty good money especially for a brewer back then. And it worked good for him. He said, you come brew the beer, I'll pay you. I just don't want to hear anything about it. And it was a little bit tough because working in a brewery remote is not easy. I'll generally keep a bartender as like an assistant brewer who would help me pull gravities or drop some yeast or whatever it was. But it was challenging because when I'd have to coordinate like grain deliveries for when I was there. And the chef, it was kind of an ass, honestly. He wouldn't let any of the cooks help unload grain, right? And so we kept grain in the basement. So I would have to, there'd be 2 pallets on the truck in the back. I'd have to first get each bag to the back of the truck, 53-footer, 80 bags of grain, quite a bit, then get it off the truck. And I'm not a big guy, off the truck, 1 bag at a time, inside, down the steps, onto the pallet, back up. And I'd be like, can any of these guys help me? It takes me like 3 hours to do this. Nope, that's your job. So, it is what it is, right? So, of course,
they were concerned about those $35 entrees.
Right. I mean, it was the weirdest brewery, and I worked there it was great because from a beer perspective, I could pretty much do whatever I wanted, as long as I didn't have to spend any real money, But I got to try out a lot of different recipes and hops and yeasts and at least what was available back then. There's not near the variety. And back then, like Columbus and Cascade was like, ooh, like revolutionary hops. So, Mount Hood and Willamette, a lot of the old traditional hops, East Kent Goldings, but anyway, I got a lot of freedom to just try different stuff. And it helped me kind of hone some recipes on a little larger scale.
And while you were working there, were you already thinking about moving to North Carolina at all, or how did you end up leaving that brewery?
Yeah, so I actually lived in 3 different places while I worked at that same brewery. In Athens, then 2 of my friends moved to outside of Asheville, a town called Bat Cave, small little town on top of a mountain. And I was barely there because I was either brewing beer or I was doing archaeology at
So
that point.
how far was the commute to the brewery from the Bat
So
Cave?
in Athens, it was 2.5 hours. In Bat Cave, it was 2.5 hours. And then I eventually got out of archaeology and got a job at Old Hickory Brewery in Hickory. And Hickory was also 2.5 hours from Columbia. So I maintained that job. I'd go down for 2 or 3 days, and it really wasn't a huge time commitment. But at Old Hickory, not only did I do the Steve Lyle is the owner, and he was the brewmaster, but I did a lot of the production, either me or him and me. But I also did all the beer festivals and sold beer in Hickory, Boone, and Asheville out of my car, my old Subaru. And so I was young, early 20s, and just couldn't work enough. I eventually quit the job in Columbia because of the time commitment on the weekends. Well, there was starting to be not a lot, some festivals, or we'd be doing events with beer and that kind of stuff. So eventually just switched to that one job. And it was a little sad to leave Columbia, but it was, ownership changes, and this guy has graduated from University of South Carolina, Columbia at 22. His dad bought him this restaurant, and it didn't last a year, because he didn't know what he was doing. And I quickly saw that and got out of there.
So that's a great point you make there. I mean, because you've talked a lot about your history on the brewing side of the operation, but there's so much knowledge needed on the business side of the operation. So at what point in time did you kind of start fine tuning your business acumen that would kind of lead to opening up the brewery?
So just being in the beer business, you're around a lot of restaurants. I didn't participate in the restaurant business in Columbia, and I didn't do a lot in Hickory either, because they had 2 restaurants, and we were either making beer to sell to accounts or to those 2 restaurants. And definitely learned some stuff about inventory and rate of sale and cleaning lines. It was all back of the house stuff, So, but you absorb a lot of information about how restaurants run, and just being in manager meetings with the cooks and the managers of the restaurants, you just kind of absorb a lot of that information. I left Old Hickory. We built a second facility, and so I learned a lot about brewery construction. We went up to Massachusetts, broke down 2 different breweries, took everything, stripped electrical boxes off the wall. I mean, everything, and put it in trucks and moved it down to North Carolina. And then we rebuilt it over about 1.5 years. The guys had bought an old building, and, so at the first brewery, the original brewery, which is now called Amos Howard's, I had to work at night because the kitchen was in the middle of the brewery. There were 3 different rooms where the beer was, and in between all that was the kitchen. So I didn't start till they mopped the floor in the kitchen. That's when I came in and started. Worked all night, and then by the time they were coming in, they'd usually cook me some eggs, and I'd go home. It was very different. And then I had to kind of do that and help build the brewery. So I was just working all the time. And
it sounds like you're learning a lot about what you did not want to do when you opened your own place.
I'm still very involved in the construction projects and all that. I mean, it's invaluable to know that kind of stuff because, kind of tying in with the first job I had where we had nothing, then we had an opportunity to at least have some good equipment and learn about how it goes together and help diagnose problems. And, I look at things from a different perspective a lot of times than our team. So when they have something wrong, I just come down and brainstorm with them and help kind of get to the root of the issue because, um, just having some real rudimentary experience doing that stuff. But nowadays we try to hire experts whenever possible because they do it better and they have time. It's their job to do.
100%. And I'm a lot like you. I like to absorb as much information as I can to try to have somewhat of a understanding on everything that I'm touching. But everybody has tasks they don't like doing. What's the one thing you don't enjoy at the brew pub
that I don't like now?
Or say back then and how it's changed over time even?
Gosh, I really love this business. It's the HR part is the part I don't like. Just you got to have employees, but employees can be tough. They take a lot of management and coaxing and support. And I'd say that although I like hanging out with them, I don't always like the HR part of it. I'm not an enforcer at all. So I try to lead by example, and I'm more of that kind of person than micromanager or enforcer. Disciplinarian, I am not. So.
And to go back to something you said a moment ago, that's why we hire experts, people who are better at these things than we will ever be.
That's right. Nowadays it's different. But for a good period of time, I focused on hiring people from larger breweries. And I still would if we could, but now there's so much competition for people now. It's different. Our type of hiring we do has changed a lot over the years. But anytime I can find someone from a larger brewery, we try to, our facilities managers worked at Avery for several years and Sweetwater before that. Doug, our brewery supervisor, he worked at Southern Tier up in New York, about 100,000 barrel brewery. TL, our brewmaster, he's more like me. He was a history major and got into brewing. He was from he went to school in Knoxville, UT, and so me and him were like best buds for a long time. And before cell phones or anything, I would call the restaurant he's working at, and hey, is TL? Ask the hostess, is TL there today? And say, oh yeah, hold on, but it's lunch. We need the line in case someone calls the restaurant? Can he call you later? But there wasn't that many people in the beer business back then, so the few people that we were really tight, and we just learned to. It was a very small community, so everyone had this sense of camaraderie, and it's still that way to a large degree. But now, most breweries are owned by people who were in other industries before and made a bunch of money, retired, and want to be in the alcohol business because it's very glamorous, or they think it is. So it wasn't like that back then. It was, things scratched together and people trying their hardest every day just to, stay open. So
how do you feel about that? How do you feel about people coming in from other industries with lesser brew knowledge?
For years and years, Paul Gatz says at the Brewers Association, I've been going to that CBC for, quite a while now. And every year they get up there and talk about how the industry was being held back by lack of capital. There was no money in it, right? I mean, even Foothills, we started with about $200,000 and a bunch of loans. That's all the money we ever had. And that's the way most breweries were. You hear the story of Sam at Dogfish Head with the half a barrel system, or Ken Grossman, or New Belgium, all very humble beginnings because there was no cash. No one wanted to put cash into beer that they didn't like. No one liked craft beer back then. It's like you had to talk them into trying it. And it was a lot more passion, I think, than now. A lot of people do brewery for fun. If it doesn't work, so what? So it's a little bit different, but I think overall it was great for the industry just to have capital coming in because people are much more aware of craft beer in general. I mean, back then it was a struggle to even get them to take a sip. And now it's not like that now.
What do you think about the level of collaboration these days? Because back probably when you opened your brewery, you knew everyone in the craft beer industry, probably within the entire state and beyond. Now with 300 plus breweries in Carolina, how relationship based is it within the industry between brewery owners now?
Well, a lot of us still make an effort to be friends and to continue to communicate. This is my 11th year on the board of the North Carolina Brewers Guild. I've been president for 7 of those years or something like that. And I'm past president.
I heard you all had a great event yesterday as well.
What did you say?
I heard you had a great event yesterday, the Brew Smart event.
Yeah, we do that. I didn't go this time, but and now that I'm past president, I'm kind of trying to back out a little bit and let everybody kind of take the helm. I have 1 more year, and then I think I'll be done for good, because it's only a 6-year. You only allow on for 6 years, and this is my second 6-year stint somehow. So, but so the guild, and there's also several 5 alliances across North Carolina, and all of us spend a lot of time making an effort to continue to get people together. The guild has the North Carolina Craft Brewers Conference here in Winston every year for the past 5 or 6 years. So we typically get about 600 attendees for that, and small compared to the national conference, but pretty good size for North Carolina. And it's just a great way to get owners and brewers in the same space, and just to talk. And because brewers thrive on communication and collaboration, and a lot of us, I never went to beer school, so I don't have that technical training. So, but I have a lot of other experience. So get people together with different kinds of experience. It's, it's a win. So,
I think as always, we can learn so much from one another.
I want to throw out just real quick a little plug. We're doing a collaboration beer with, we've done it several times, but it's called Old Rabbit's Foot. I don't know if you've heard of that before, but it's Duck Rabbit, Old Hickory Brewery, and Foothills. So I think we first did it back in 2011 or something like that, and then we've done it several times over the years, but not for about 4 years. I think the last time we did it. So it's coming out in October. So just communicating earlier today with Stephen and Paul about getting their barrels. It's a barrel age. We all take our barrel age imperial stouts and blend it all together, one beer. So it makes for a very unique beer. So.
No, that sounds fantastic. And no, it's great you've maintained that relationship. How many years have you done it now?
Well, we don't do it every year, but I think this is the 5th or 6th time we've done it. So it's a fun thing that, I'm sure you're familiar with our beer sexual chocolate. As far as I know, it was pretty much the first beer release in the Southeast, or I don't want to say the first, because I'm sure there was something else. But it was the first large scale one anyway, where we'd get several hundred people, and it kind of, back then it was like Dark Lord and Darkness, and what's that other one? Bourbon County, and that was about it. There wasn't a lot of people didn't do beer releases. It was just something that didn't really happen. And once they popped the cap here in North Carolina, we started, of course, immediately started making other beer styles, because it's very limiting to be under 6. So I've always loved that. I think it goes back to my study of culture and people. It's just, I love that, bringing people together in that kind of unfiltered state. We used to have these beer releases where we'd let people bring all this beer in from across the world, the country, but also from anywhere, and just we'd open up the back of our brewery area, not our serving area up front, but just let people try different beers and sample. Obviously, this was all pre-COVID, but did you hear me mention Brew 52s earlier? Mm-hmm. We were cutting out. Okay, so that was the beer club, the homebrew club in Athens. We had another club called the Yeasty Boys, and I think obviously referenced it. I was 19 when I started brewing beer. I was below the drinking age, right? So this was a group of older guys who loved beer, did not homebrew, but would bring, as they traveled, would bring beers from all over, and we'd all get together once a month, and we'd rate beers. It was a one, two, or three. That's it. It was real simple, and definitely we used to see a bunch of the Bell's stouts that they had like, even back then they had like 5 different stouts, all kinds of Belgians that were the ones that were available anyway. Because much less variety back then was available. So just that idea of free form sampling, and I just have always loved that, and getting people together and what do you like? What do you like? Try this. And it was always a lot of fun.
That's the best part, the social aspect. I know what we all miss so much and look forward to getting back to.
Yeah, the COVID has been tough for everybody. But like our sales team, we have a pretty large team. We have 12 people on our sales team, and I know for them, they went from mainly on-premise work to working, packing beer in grocery stores. And I know, they're happy to be back at it selling on the on-premise. Of course, now we're waffling. We're kind of teetering on the edge here of, are we going to stay open? In fact, we've seen a lot of accounts move back to 1.6 barrels here in the past month or so, as things have gotten, more a high alert again. Is a lot of accounts lost a lot of money on beer, when everything shut down. So I think everybody's a little gun shy of having a bunch of inventory, which I'm full support of. Fresh beer is the best. There's no reason to have a bunch of inventory of beer. We'll make more. So
hopefully the conditions in the world just start to get better. We can get through this together.
Yeah. So
I want to go back when you did the sexual chocolate release. That first release, was it your goal to make it a repeated event, or did you or someone at the brewery just have this idea? Hey, wouldn't this be fun? Let's give it a shot. And how did it transform?
Pretty much, yeah. We made a double IPA. That was the first high alcohol beer we did, and then we're like, well, let's make an imperial stout. I mean, there were barely any double IPAs around back then because you weren't allowed to make them. So we made an imperial stout, and just so happened it was kind of ready by Valentine's Day. I mean, the first year we made it, it was all draft, no bottles. And so it was just, you got to remember, back then, nobody canned beer, so it was all bottles. So we were doing, first year we did draft, and we had just random people calling the restaurant saying, if I bring in a 12-ounce bottle, can you fill it for me? Or tell me how I can fill bottles off a growler, it's weird questions like that. I'm like, well, I don't recommend that, So we said, all right, we probably need to bottle this beer next year, because it was weird to get those kind of calls, because there wasn't, just that, it wasn't that kind of consumer interaction really back then. Beer Advocate had just been come out, and Beer Advocate, for whatever it is now, I mean, don't frequent it as much as I used to, but it really was social media before there was social media. There were beer people who got on there and talked about beer, and they were back and forth. And, we utilized that in the early years to get the word out to people, what we were doing. So the second year we made it, we did like 500 bottles, and we literally used like a Blickman beer gun. It's a little homebrew device, and that's how we filled them. We stood in the cooler and just filled them off a tank, and it was far from ideal, but we sold them all like quickly, and it was this weird phenomena that started. So
that second year, I imagine you had a little bit more planning go behind it, because you knew what to expect, at least a little bit, from that first time doing the release.
We kept it very controlled. Even for all the beer we put out now, when we make that beer, usually 90% of the volume, 90% of the volume goes to draft. We always wanted to. So, just backing up, let's back up again. Yeah, I left Old Hickory after about 4.5 years. We had built that brewery, and I wanted to build a brand, and these guys weren't quite ready to do that yet. They had the restaurants, and we sold some beers to places, but I kept kind of like, let's do more. And anyway, I decided I needed to do my own thing. Right, so I actually now I'm gonna go back to my buddy Dave, who he was the brewer of Vista from Athens. I'm still friends with him to this day. He called me. He said, "Oh, there's a guy that's thinking about starting a brewery in Winston." So I connected with it was 3 other guys actually. So we connected, and I moved to Winston. Actually took a detour to a brewery in Greenville, South Carolina, Blue Ridge Brewing. Bob was one of our original investors. So his brewery, he needed a brewer. So I moved down there. I owned a home in Hickory where my girlfriend, now wife, was living there. And so I was just in South Carolina during the week. Then I'll be back home. And so I worked down there while we were opening Foothills. And that took about 1.5 years to get everything, kind of ready. And then, so we opened just as a brew pub, because back then that's all there was. There was no such thing as tasting rooms. It just wasn't. Highland was open. Let's see, there was Highland, no tasting room. Old Hickory had a restaurant, but no tasting room at the brewery. Red Oak, no tasting room. Weeping Radish was around. They were a restaurant. Carolina Brewing Company and Carolina Brewery, both in Chapel Hill, Highway Springs. They had opened. There wasn't many other breweries besides that. And the model was a lot of wood and food, brew pub. That's, that was the model. If you're going to open a brewery, that's what it was. So when we opened, that was our focus. And to one of your questions earlier, we hired some people who were knowledgeable in the restaurant, including my wife, who was in fine dining for many years. So she kind of helped us elevate our food, and we also hired our original chef and sous chef. Were from a place called Noble's Grill, which is now Roosters. A couple of them in Charlotte and up here in Triad. Fine dining, right? That's Sarah worked there while we were opening opening Foothills here in Winston. And then she transitioned to working at the brew pub.
And that's one thing I wanted to ask you about. Had you worked with your wife prior?
No, because she was in fine dining and I was at a brewery. So it was fine because we have much different, focuses. Hers was on service and food and hospitality in general, and mine was more on production and just trying to focus on quality and production. And then after about half a year, we started to develop half a year to a year, some off-site accounts. We went back to Hickory and Boone, Asheville, where I had previously sold beer, and we kind of reestablished some of those contacts, and started selling beer in those markets. So we were self-distributing, and we did that from 2006 until 2013. We were definitely one of the largest, still even, self-distributing breweries in North Carolina. Not the largest, but we did about 14,000 barrels in self-distribution. And that was all draft, because we were all most of it was out of our brew. We did about 8,000 barrels out of our brew pub. Then we built the facility I'm in now, or Kimwell. It's on Kimwell Drive. That's where we have a 50-barrel brew house that we bought from. It was the old Carolina Blonde Brewery in Mooresville. And we bought that equipment. Actually, our first brewery that was the old Cottonwood Brewery in Boone from a long time ago. And then, the Carolina Blonde Brewery bought the Cottonwood brands, and they were made in Mooresville. And then we bought that brewery too. And then eventually we ended up buying the brands as well. So it was kind of a long, twisted fate with those guys. But, so we self-distributed. We had, guys in Asheville, Boone. We were going up there, Charlotte, and eventually the Triangle. And that was a big focus for us for several years. As the restaurant was going, the restaurant was growing, and then we were growing the brand out there in the market, just draft, and definitely learned a lot doing that. We had done it a little bit at Old Hickory, but it was not near the scale that we ended up doing. And we had like 9 trucks out there, driving around delivering beer. It was really the Triangle that blew up for us. And today, that's still our largest, even bigger than our home market. The Raleigh-Durham Chapel Hill is just a monster market for us. So,
I mean, craft beer is growing exponentially in Carolina, but why do you think in those early days you saw success in places like the Triangle? And how were you educating guests about the value in the craft beer you were making?
Say that again. Sorry.
How were you best able to connect with the customers back then? Because obviously craft beer was still a new thing, so to speak. So how are you educating them about what you were doing?
A lot of events, a lot of samplings. We used to do cask events. That was really popular. I mean, we used to go to do cask events at restaurants, at our place too. But when we do it in restaurants, there'd be lines out the door. Like what are these? Why do they? Just people had never heard of it. They didn't know what it was. They wanted a little piece of that, of the craft beer world and the culture. One of the first accounts we started selling to up in the Triangle was the Tyler's Taproom. You familiar with that? Or
actually,
it's actually all of them are, I believe, closed now. But we went up and met with Tyler, Daniel, and Rob, who were the 3 owners. Me and my head sales guy at the time, and we're like, look, we want to sell beer up here. What do we got to do to work with you guys? And Tyler was an old Red Hook employee with AB, or before it was AB, from from West Coast. And they're like, well, you gotta come. We need you. If we're gonna sell you beer, you gotta commit to us. Like, we don't want like 2 weeks of beer and then you say, I'm out, or I'm out of that beer. How about this one? Because that's still to this day a huge problem. Somewhat of a self-inflicted problem in our industry is people don't like to make the same beer twice a lot of times. Of course, I still think there's a room for core brands and flagships in the market. We would maybe not be open today if not for flagships, But so that's what they wanted. They're like, we want to be able to know that we're going to have the same beer available all the time, So we said, yeah, we'll do it. And, they really supported us, as well as a bunch of, the Triangle was, didn't have that many breweries. I mean, back then, I think there was a time when Charlotte had no breweries. When we bought the Carolina Blonde Brewery, I think that was the only one. Or there had been a wave of breweries before that. Like, you heard of Johnson's Brewing?
I have not.
It's from like the early 90s. The guys from Old Hickory bought that equipment too. So they used to buy a bunch of equipment. Anywhere they'd see stuff, used equipment, they were always buying it. So like after work, we'd drive to Charlotte and load equipment and then drive back. But there was a whole wave of breweries that opened that didn't make great beer and didn't make it, so yeah, anyway, so we went to the Triangle. That market was just really blooming, and with there's a lot of education there. I mean, Durham is still one of our very best markets to this day, and the penetration of money from the school and the hospital and all the other stuff around there, and a ton of education. That's just primes a pump for craft beer sales. And it used to be you'd walk into a bar in Durham and you walk out with 3 taps. It was pretty easy to sell beer back then. They were just receptive, and people just wanted whatever you had. They just wanted something new and something with a story. So
that story component, absolutely huge.
Yeah, and we did well. And eventually when we got into bottles, we decided to stop distributing and move to wholesalers, because we ended up with like 600 accounts, 550 to 600 accounts. That was just draft. And I knew that we're not one of the breweries that have started with cash flush. we were a bunch of loans and stuff. We kind of had to make a decision to buy equipment and build this facility, or buy more trucks and hire delivery drivers. And it just wasn't realistic that we were going to be able to do both successfully, because, well, there's 140 Harris Teeters, there's 490 Food Lions. There's no way we're going to be able to deliver to all these stores successfully and pull up the beer. It was an impossibility for us to. It's different in some markets. Raleigh or Charlotte, they're very focused markets as far as geographically and population wise. So it's a little easier to service those markets. The Triad is very spread out. So we're 2 hours from everything. 2 hours from Asheville, Raleigh, an hour and a half from Charlotte. So anywhere we went, we had to, drive. So it wasn't like we could really put 5 guys in Charlotte, because they'd all have to drive an hour and a half to get there. So market was different. The acceptance level in restaurants was much less overall. Right now, pretty much every restaurant's got some craft beer in it. Not everyone, but 90% of them do. At least Sierra Nevada, or something. So it was a hard decision, and although I love our distributors we work with for the most part, every day, not a day goes by where I don't think, man, if we were self-distributing, we would have, because now we have to, we sell beer and then we step back and let our distributors handle it. And there's definitely instances where stuff doesn't get done, or it missed the delivery day, or the order was wrong. Back then we would do anything we could to get beer to people, because we were, trying hard to grow the brand. And it's very important.
You've grown the brand a ton over the past, how many years are you at now?
We just hit our, in March was our 16th.
Yeah, and that's amazing. It's amazing what you've created in that time. You have 3 locations now. What's next? Do you have any other boxes on that list you'd like to check off for personally or professionally?
To be in this during this wave of so many breweries, our personal focus, so there were 4 of us, 4 investors when we started, and now there's 2. We bought 2 of them out along the way. Matt and I both have, wife and families, and we both have all girls, so a lot of girl power here. But we kind of switched focus, it's very much harder to grow rapidly now with so much competition, and it's hard to break through. It's much harder to break through as far as getting information out there and that kind of stuff, because there's so much noise with 370 breweries compared to 19. We were the 19th open, so we've kind of switched focus to satisfaction, employee satisfaction, personal satisfaction, focus on profitability, and just taking care of our employees the best we can. To me, that's a big, part, feel good kind of thing, is to have people who grow, move here and start families and grow wealth. Winston's not as exciting of a town as Asheville or Charlotte or Raleigh or Charleston or, wherever. So when we recruit people, we have to be like, well, it's a really great cost of living and it's really great schools here. So if you have kids, so it's not quite, it's a different kind of recruiting here, but I don't know, box I'd like to check off.
Well, how about personally? You've succeeded so much professionally and you've created a great culture at Foothills. But personally, do you want to travel? Do you want to open another business? I know you're passionate about coffee as well. Are there any other risks you'd like to take in your life?
Right. We're growing our coffee business, and that's really exciting for us. We're making cold brew coffee for us and for some other coffee roasters too, because we kind of see that as something a lot of coffee roasters can't do. Baking beans and brewing large scale amounts of liquid are very different, things. So I definitely want to grow the coffee business. That's is definitely a goal. And like I do a little farming at my house, so we bring in vegetables for the restaurant. And although right now it's just me, I hope to be able to get some employees out there, try to have some different kind of everybody gets stuck in a rut. It'd be nice to be able to do something like that. Have employees kind of work a shift a week, and be a little more, do more with that in our restaurant. And not only farm to table, but really coming from one source. I do a little bit, but it's definitely a goal to incorporate more of our own food at a restaurant. So.
No, that's fantastic. And as we've kind of talked about as we wind down right now, what a weird year and a half it's been. You're married, you've got 2 girls. How do you maintain, a great quality of mental health in your life? How do you kind of take time for you to just sit back, step away from the brewery, and enjoy the moment?
I work in my yard, whether it's, I live on a little Yadkin River here in town, so it's like a floodplain. And so I'm out there planting, weeding, mowing, harvesting, just that kind of stuff. And, or just mulling around out there, trying to find ways to keep the deer away. I really enjoy just decompressing out there, and it's very quiet, very quiet. And, we moved out there because of that, it was a very social life at the, working in a brewery. So it's nice to be able to go home and just not have any social life. It's been tough, man. Our 15th anniversary is our anniversary is on St. Patrick's Day, and which is a great day for anniversary. On our 15th anniversary in March 17th, 2020, instead of celebrating our anniversary, the state closed down all the on-premise, and we laid off 100 employees. That was the opposite. That had to be the worst day we've ever had in this business. And then we realized we probably shouldn't have laid off all the brewery people, because it went from, we do a large amount of draft still to this day. For a long time, we were 100% draft. And that's one of the things I think helped our brand be successful, is we were really, it was a little bit hard to get because it was draft only, but we had built a very good following. So that by the time we did get to package, a lot of people already knew our brand. Then with COVID, everything went from draft to packages, so we had to do, ultimately it's less beer, but way more packages. So, with all our accountants and everybody was in the back, packing boxes of bottles or cans. And it was a crazy time, like it was for all brewers. We definitely had a great support, from all the local people buying our beer and, food and to-go food and all that. It was, couldn't have asked for better customers as far as support during all that. I can't wait to get out of it. I'll tell you, I actually had 13 years ago, I had a kidney transplant. So I'm immunocompromised. So even through all of this, we were self-distributing. I was on dialysis for a year, doing it at home. I was at home dialysis, then working, all day, and it was a crazy time. But I love the industry, so it's never really like work. I love everything about it. So.
Oh yeah, I mean, you get to talk to great people, you get to brew great beer, you build relationships, and
the people, the community. Why did I choose beer over archaeology? Because at the end of the day, watching someone, drink a product that you made and with a smile on their face is extremely satisfying to me. And archaeology was kind of like being like a gypsy, go where the work is. Not nearly as satisfying at a personal level. So.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it's just the simple things like being in your lawn, getting a little bit dirty, drinking beer at the end of the day. Sometimes all by yourself. That's all we need, just that moment you can feel zen. And it's amazing learning from you and hearing all that you've done and what you've learned over the years. So, Jamie, I really appreciate you hanging out with me today. It's been a really fun time.
Yeah,
hopefully
quick hour.
Meet in person. It's nice to have that interaction.
That's right. So I really appreciate you having me on, Andrew, and good luck.